going to take a deep dive into New Hope and the use of Ableton Live in primarily the weekend broadcast services. So this is going to be quite a bit deeper than our setting up our workflow class, and that one is meant just to get you going and save your, we'll call it your work after the weekend and whatnot for reference. This one's going to go into more of the routing and the how and the things to watch for, and a little bit of troubleshooting exercises. So the first thing I want to do, this thing all works by the Dante technology. So the Dante virtual sound card is set to run on startup, but sometimes on occasion you may encounter a reboot and it didn't start automatically or something of that nature. This is how it looks, and this toggle button would toggle it to actually starting and stopping. And then we have the ability to see the IP address and the negotiated speed there. We always want that to be running and locked out and locked in with an IP address, of course, of the 192.168.2 range. That always needs to be that case. And then, of course, the 1 gigabits. And all these other settings, those should never change in this application. Another thing here, the network interface should always be set to this Ethernet 1 on the Ableton Live machine, because that's actually the name of the adapter. If we go to the Windows side of the house and we look at the Ethernet adapter, what's plugged into the computer network, we see its name right there, and we can go to status. If we go to status, we're going to see these same parameters here that we see in the Dante controller. One moment here. Let me move this out of the way. Can I move it out of the way? I think I can. Let's keep trying. Well, we can move this. All right, these two here should always match. All right, that's what you want to look for. That's very important stuff. Otherwise, this will never work correctly. So we have that Ethernet adapter. The network interface is set to the same naming convention that we see in Windows here. All right, this is the Windows side. This is the Dante Virtual Sound Card. I'm hammering on that because that's really, really critical. Quick reference here, you can just minimize that and leave that down in the tray. Dante Virtual Sound, or excuse me, Dante Controller. We've already talked quite a little bit about this. We're going to be referencing it through the video today. That is running on the Ableton Live machine, and we can go in, and again, just for subject matter, we can look at the broadcast machine, this computer that we're on right now, and look at the receive channels, and it's listening to the IDR, so our front of house console, the IDR 64 up behind the stage. It's listening to 1 through 64 of those Dante outputs. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. And just looking at my preferences sheet here. All right, so we're going to open up a couple other things. We're going to look at the iLok License Manager. What is the iLok License Manager? Well, there's a little dongle in the back of this computer. Oh, we'll do this later. That it uses a physical licensing structure to allow, in this case, the Steven Slate drum triggers to actually work. We want to see that active. If for some reason your drum replacement isn't sounding right or snare replacement isn't sounding right, we'll get into what that is. It's likely something to do with the iLok not being able to authenticate. Don't have to check on this regularly, but again, this is a deep dive. Want you to be aware of these things, of how this works. All right, we can close that out. So we're going to look at a repeat from the weekend workflow of Ableton Live and how to set your workflow up. We're going to open up our master template. So to do that, I click on the folder on the desktop with the exclamation points on it, similar to Reaper, and then we're going to open up that Ableton Live set. When we do that, it will go through the process of obviously opening up the entire workflow and things. But again, since this is a deep dive class, I want to highlight a couple troubleshooting things as we go along. It should never be the case that you have to go into this because we have this saved in our scene or our Ableton Live set. But By chance, if Ableton Live is being squirrely, there is an audio driver that we have to select in here for it to choose that Dante virtual sound card. All right, and how we do that is in Options, Preferences, and you don't have to have the large New Hope set open to get to here. This is nothing. This is more program functionality than the set itself. But this audio, under the audio tab here, under driver type, that should always be set to ASIO, and it should always be set to the Dante virtual sound card. All right, wanted to highlight that as that is very important for normal operation. So when we are in this mode here, we get presented with everything under the sun that has everything to do with how we mix the broadcast stream. A couple things on the front end of this to reiterate. If we were to go down, and we do have an audio source playing, actually. I have computer 1 and 2 playing. Well, I thought I did. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, now we have an audio source playing. Sorry about that. I'm going to record a little bit because I wanted to stop and make sure and reiterate about the collect and save function. So if we go to, I'll come back to this, but if we go to session view versus arrangement view, and we record some audio, let me put I'm still learning this here. I want that to be right there. All right, so if we record some audio, we should see down on computer 1 and 2. Yep, we do. We see some signal here, and we see our timeline starting to gain there. So let's expand this out, and this is ever so touchy. All right. And I feel like I expanded it way out. There we go. And move it over. All right, good. So we're going to see some things writing to disk, so on and so forth. So once we, so let's just pretend we're tracking everything. I mean, we are tracking everything right now. So you can see that we have no signal on these sources up here, but we would if there's information. So let's just go ahead and stop this from recording. So we recorded almost 28 bars at 120 BPMs per minute, per minute. So if we press tab again, we're just pressing tab to go from session view to arrangement view. This is session view. This is arrangement view. We see the grid where tracks are recording in arrangement view. We mix in session view. To get our files to go to the proper file structure of where we want them to save on a weekend, I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to do save live set as, and I'm always going to go to the tracking D drive. All right, I'm going to do nh tracks 828 2020. I'm going to go into that folder, so I created a new folder to get my own little section of the world, and then I'm going to use the same naming convention for the Ableton Live set, nh tracks 82820, and then I'm going to hit enter. All right, that is step 1 to saving your live set. The next thing we need to do is do collect all and save, because if you look at this folder right now that we just created in the D drive, so this is a hard drive, this PC tracking, or you can just go right to tracking. We see our folder. Everybody good with that? But if we go to properties, we only see 1.09 meg. That's just the data of this. We don't have our audio files in there yet. But this next thing we're going to do is the collect all and save. And what that's going to do, it's going to ask us a series of questions, 4 questions. These defaults are fine. Yes on files from elsewhere. We're going to specify which used media files are to be copied into the project. So leave the defaults as is, these 3 yellows and the 1 no, and then hit OK. And what we should see, just like that, we see those files move from their, we'll call them their temporary location, over to this folder. Now when I go to properties of this, what do we see now? 447 meg. See a lot more information in there. And that's how we put our recorded tracks into the specified weekend or set folder on the tracking drive itself. So let's get into device slot and option view. So this is pretty important right here. Over on the right hand side here, there's one button that's grayed out. The one button that's grayed out is an important one. This is a customized field for Ableton Live that we programmed to have in here to add us in the device slot options view. So in this channel strip, like for the black microphone, we can see that we can see all of our plugins going on. Now we have a tray view down here in what's called the audio effects rack, but we can have a bird's eye view without having to drill into each one of these, and we can toggle these off and on. You're not going to do that a lot, but you can toggle those off and on. I think that's pretty important. And let's reiterate again the session view versus arrangement view. So this is session view that we're actually mixing and moving the faders in. So if we go over to computer 1, we're mixing, we're moving the faders, all that good stuff. This is session view. The tab button takes you to arrangement view, and that is where our tracks are being recorded. Now we do have some visibility over here of what the tracks are, what bus or group they belong to, etc., etc. We can record arm them, we can input monitor them or track activate them. Just some good stuff, but you're going to look in here and make sure things are writing to disk, and if you're reviewing your set and you want to go in between, oh, I like that section again, let's go listen to that. You're just going to click your cursor there and it's going to take you to those moments in time. You can see how I'm doing that there. I could expand that a little bit. Pardon me. Whoops. Contract that a little bit. And then I can just point my cursor to where I want that to go on next measure, and it will play that from there. All right. You can see you could also do a region if you wanted to. Oh, I really like that drum fill. I want to hear that again. Let me hear that again. You guys get the idea there. So that's arrangement versus session view. All right, let's get into the tracks starting from the left to right here, or the channel strips. So right out of the gate, we just go right into the industry standard format, starting with the rhythm instruments first, working our way into the guitars, and then the key section, percussion. That's great. And we're back. Working our way in down the line to the vocals and some of the things that aren't normal weekend operation for you guys. But when you do open this up, all the tracks that are used, we'll call it 80% of the time, maybe more, 75% of the time, are record armed and track activated already. Record armed means it's going to actually record over in session view or arrangement view. Track activated means you're actually going to be able to listen to it and have that go out to broadcast. So for example, if I take off this right here, you guys will see this master output drop off. All right. If I track activate that, I'm going to be able to listen to that. So here's somewhat of a minor detail you need to understand. If you're using a device on a weekend, you need to have it recording armed and track activated. Otherwise, it will not route down to the master bus. What is the master bus? Okay, I'm going to go through the signal flow with the drums because it's just the most complex, and then we'll be able to work backwards from there. So the drums have 2 groups or buses and we can collapse those down to this manner and control all those instruments in those groups with one fader once we get our mix set. But the drums themselves have a couple of things going on. Let me talk about the naming convention real quick. We see a shorthand name up here at the top, but down here in the bottom right, you'll see it's kind of small. It says kick replace. It's the full name. And then the next one to it, kick out, snare replace, snare up, so on and so forth. So look down in that bottom right for the full names. And then talking through the drums real quick. So how do we get the channel strip to listen to the input coming in from the Dante Virtual Sound Card? Well, that's actually quite easy in Ableton Live, because everything we're doing is going to be external in, and then we have our channel sources 1 through 64 right here. All right, and you can see a few of them. I have the console on in the worship center right now. A few of them have audio being picked up because there's a group in there praying. Like, for example, the ambient mic is picking up minorly some signal in there because they're praying out loud. Moving through the channel assignments themselves, we get these to listen to the channels by this drill down. And what am I referencing? I'm referencing this master list of Dante assignments. So if we look at I'll just pick one out of the blue. If we look at the orange mic, and then we go over to the orange mic channel, that was 27 on the sheet. It's 27 that we have assigned in this setup, in this assignment here. So that's how we actually assign those things, and those also coexist with it. You can look at the iLive editor video for what I'm doing here, but I'm going to quickly show you. Those are subject to this Dante input-output section. So if I look at the 64 coming from the iLive, which I'm doing now, that is input direct out, orange mic 35. All right, now 35 is the one of 64 channels. This is going to get crazy, that the input side of the iLive can have, not necessarily the Dante output. So on and so forth. All right, we'll just stop there. So 27 coming from the iLive, going through the sequence here. We programmed it because we wrote it down on paper that we were going to have input or Dante output 27 be the orange mic. We programmed it in the iLive console. So this is iLive Editor. Let me minimize this window. This is iLive Editor. We programmed it in the port B Dante outputs that 27 is the orange mic. Then over in Ableton Live, we've said, okay, you're listening to Dante 1 through 64. Your external in is going to be 27. Same thing with the Reaper tracking PC. Orange mic, Dante 27. It's happening in that world with the same ecosystem of Dante Virtual Sound Card at the Reaper PC. All right, not to get too deep. All right, drum buses. Drum buses, we can get all of our mix working good between the kick replace. So this is actually a artificial sample, this kick replace, Stephen Slate drum triggers. That fires an artificial sample when the actual kick drum at the electric drums is pushed or is kicked with the foot kicker, the foot pedal. And then we get this bus happening that includes everything from the drums, so kick, snare, tom 2, tom 3, which is a rack and floor labeled appropriate here, hi-hats, and then the cymbals. The ride is separate, the overhead left is separate, the overhead right is separate. So we mix our drums here and get the group feeling good, and then we can use what's called parallel compression in the second group. Now all drums do not come to this, but what does come to this is the snare replacement, the snare top, and then the rack and floor toms. So the kicks do not come to this and the cymbals do not come to this. What does this do? This gives us a bigger, broader sound by taking the output of those from bus 1. So we go snare in from the source, we process it through drum bus 1, it leaves there and goes right into drum bus 2, processes through drum bus 2, and then goes all the way down this grid. I mean, he doesn't have to go through all this, just logically speaking, down to this band bus. So if you look closely here, the output of drums 2 goes to band. All right, so we leave, we come in up here, process, leave. I'm just drawing this out on the screen, and go back up to the top and give it like we're doing one of these things, right? And then we go down to the band bus. Band bus is clear down here, and it processes the information coming from drum bus number 2. And then where does the band bus go? Band bus goes over to mix A, or mix aux, excuse me. What is mix aux? Mix aux is where we're doing mastering. So we have mastering plugins that are going on in this sequence here, and you can actually go in and look at the plugins with the little wrench. I always think of it, and don't mess with these, but you can go in and look at the plugins and the settings with the wrench. And so just on the bus of mix A, we have 4 things going on to give the last 5% or the last little sizzle on the final output. All right, and you go into the wrench of the plugins down in the audio effects rack. So if I want to look at the black mic and I wanted to look at auto tune, I could do that. All right, auto tune's a good one. We'll come back to that in just a moment. So mix A then goes to the master bus, which then the master bus is basically at this point just an output of a stereo pair that then leaves Ableton Live and goes to the broadcast, or the production and the broadcast AVIO adapters. The production one goes to the ATEM switcher, the back of it, with a physical XLR interface. The broadcast one plays the audio to your local monitors and headphones that are right in front of you if you're watching this in front of the Ableton Live template. And then we also can use that stereo source. We put that directly natively over the network into vMix as well. That was a big example of the drum bus going from bus 1 to bus 2, down to the band bus, down to the mix A bus for some more processing, down to the master bus. And that's really the genius of this template, is all along those sequences there's intelligence of fine-tuning happening that's frankly way above my pay grade, and well worth the intelligence we've gleaned from getting this template. Let's see, moving on. Names and tracks, we've talked about that already. Let's camp out on the vocal channels for a little bit and talk about auto-tune. Auto-tune is the ability to make good singers great singers, and to make great singers world-class singers. And what it does is it's listening to the pitch of the source. In this case, we're only auto-tuning the vocals. It's listening to the pitch of the source and getting it to perfect, as long as it knows what the perfect plumb line is. What do I mean by that? The perfect plumb line is the key of the tune that is being sung or played. Alright, so auto-tune, we have to interact with that on a regular basis. and that is through a plugin. So if we bring up this little guy down here called Auto Key, right? I'm going to press auto. I'm on the black vocal channel, and if I press the wrench, I get this Auto Key thing. Now I would recommend you right away go open this and have this up at all times. What Auto Key is the ability for us to select the major or minor, flat or sharp key, and then apply it to all of the vocals being auto-tuned. So for example, if I was to select, let's just say we're doing a song in C minor right now. Pretty rare, but you could be. And our next tune is going to be in D major. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cue that up here and then choose when they start the tune or modulate, you're going to press send to auto tune, and it's going to update all these vocal channels that have auto tune. Which ones have auto tune? Black, red, yellow, white, green, brown, orange. They all have auto tune. So how do I know that it's updated? Remember the wrench? We can hold down Shift and bring up the auto tune instance. If you watch closely, just pausing for a second, these are set very specifically. Don't move those. They're set in a way that the auto tune is as transparent as possible, meaning we can't hear it working. That's very important when you're auto-tuning vocals. We're not trying to have the auto-tune be heard. We're trying to have it as transparent as possible, as I already said. Okay, so let's pretend we're wrapping up the tune in D major, and we're going to go up a whole step. We cue up E major, and then we send to auto-tune. Now you can see I didn't interact with this over here, and once I sent to auto-tune, it updated that. All right, I happen to be on the auto-tune instance of the black microphone, but if I go to the auto-tune instance of the white microphone, you can see that I'm also in E major. Very important. Talking down through the channel strips a little bit more, we'll stay on vocals. So the vocals have obviously the most processing being done on them to make them sound world-class, very clear, and professional. The everything else basically that is an instrument that is not drums has just a couple plugins or one plugin processing on it. What do I mean by that? So if we look at our acoustic guitar, we can see that we have an SSL channel strip, and the SSL channel strip is very very intricate to the detail of how the sound is happening. Channel strip meaning there's compression, gates, EQing, all happening right here in this guy. Why is this important? So it's very important to get to know your SSL channel strip because that's where your gain structure lives. So we've talked till we're blue in the face about gain structure and the importance of it. If we don't set that in these channels as well via the SSL channel strip, we're going to be in bad shape. So let's go down to the computer that we have an audio source playing. Oh, lo and behold, we have an SSL channel strip on those. If I go into the wrench of that, what do we see? Well, we can see that our input gain is pretty awesome right now. And I'm setting gain structure off of, this is perfect right here. We want to be hitting the yellow or just living in the 10 on a solid yellow. And what that would look like is this. All right, that's awesome gain structure right there. This happens to be a very an already mastered source playing a music source that's meant to have a perceived value that's the same all the time. So gain is a little bit easier to set for this example. But if your meter is going up and down on your kick drum or your acoustics player is playing louder or quieter, that's why we need to have them essentially play at a loud volume. All right, if I back this way down, what do we think is going to happen? All of a sudden, we don't have great gain structure. Now our meter looks fine over here in Ableton. That's a little bit deceiving. Okay, But what we have to focus back on is not this meter. This meter in the SSL channel strip is the gain structure we're looking for, okay? So you can see me, I'm just clicking and moving that knob up or down. I'm going to get that to start hitting in. And here's something that's interesting. You can see that as I put that, that gain structure in, you're going to see different sections of this plugin, this SSL channel strip, start to work or not. So right now, this gain structure would be too low to even pass signal through this thing. So that's fascinating. And so as we bring that up, you're going to see once we get close to the excellent gain structure that we need, you'll see that start to pass signal through here and process audio. Now in this example, that's working as a gate. So we want the gate to open and process audio through there, or you wouldn't hear any sound. I'll just stop with that. It looks like that tune might be going to a quieter moment, so we'll just leave that right there. But that is effectively, it's back. That is effectively how we process gain structure and make sure it's excellent inside of Ableton Live. All right, I'm going to breeze through these channels here. So going back to bass, we have our bass direct in, input 9, external input 9, external input 10 for acoustic. We have electric guitar 1, left and right. All right, you guys run mono electrics, but I've made provisions in this template to use stereo at some point in the future. Why would we use stereo? We listen in stereo, we can create a stereo image, we can get instruments out of the way. I would say at a default level, we should always, if it makes sense for the instrument to use stereo, i.e. electric guitars with effects. Bass does not. Bass is not a stereo instrument. It has a mono frequency range. It doesn't compete with a lot of other instruments. Kick drum would be another example of this. That it's not a great, it wouldn't be relevant. But things that have a wide frequency range, i.e. keyboards, piano, electric guitars, you could even argue that the choir would sound pretty good in a stereo image and pan. And you could actually play around with that in this template for broadcast as you guys get to know and understand it. But you can see that we only have one input that actually has an in, but we have provisions and a bus that we want to control one volume and collapse that and preserve screen real estate, you could say. So electric guitar 2, 12, piano, 13 and 14. Let's check our work. What's 13 and 14 on our list? Oh, lo and behold. Piano 1 and 2. We're doing good. All right, so you guys get the idea. So get your mix working good between the two sources, and then you have one volume to control. That's pretty clever. Moving on, percussion top and bottom. Then we have tracks, backing tracks, and click. And you probably don't ever want click armed, but we can see signal there if you look closely. There might be some times when it's appropriate just to check in on that, troubleshooting purposes and whatnot. And then we move into vocals. We've already talked about auto tuning, but just recapping a little bit, that auto key plugin is how we select the key and then send to auto tune. If you go into an auto tune plugin and hold down shift to bring up more than one, click the wrench, C major. If we go to D major, send to auto tune, D major. It's working, it's moving, it's doing what it's supposed to. Then we move on down the line, MC, Lav, computer, computer 1. If you're playing content from Pro Presenter that needs to go out to broadcast, that's where computer 1 comes into play. Lav 2, that's there for provisions on the console for when you guys have Lav 2 opportunities. Choir mics is in a group. Choir mics, this would be a good example of you could actually play around with some panning scenarios. Right now they're not panned, they're just coming right down the middle. The center would tell us that, but if I did want to pan to the left or the right, it's in a value of up to 50, and I'm just going up and down. You can expand this out here. Let me expand this channel out so I can see more of the detailed controls. If we look at this here, let's say I wanted to pan it right. Man, it's hard on this remote session. I wanted to pan it right there, and then the choir 2, I wanted to pan it the other direction a little bit. Then we could create that image and actually keep the voices a little bit more separate in the mix from the source, or just create a different, wider listening experience. It really it doesn't seem like it would make a huge difference, but it really makes a ginormous difference. You can also do that by, you can also do that by, if you want to go back to the middle, just double click there and it'll just go right back to the middle. Ableton Live's pretty good about getting things back to the default with a double click. Same thing with your fader. If you look at the fader on choir, right now it's being reflected in a -15 from Unity cut. If I double click that, it goes right back to Unity. All right. Not that you need it there, but just a heads up on that. Orchestra. Let's talk about some of the non-common things that you guys have. I think you guys have orchestra once every 3 weeks, I want to say. But here it is: general orchestra, violin, flute, clarinet, cello, all assigned. We can check our work. What do we got? 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. 38, yep, 39, 40, 41, 42. Looks good. Moving right along. We got Vox, dramas, plays, musicals, cantatas, graduations. I don't know. They're there. Flex channels, 1 through 4. Nothing's provisioned on these right now, but they are assigned, and we can program those to come out of the iLive console. What do I mean by that? If I go back over to iLive Editor and look at those, I think it was what, 51, 50, yeah, 51, 51, 52, 53, 54, all those say not patched, but we have provisions made for those at least on paper, to be able to go in a dynamic nature and adjust to things needed in the moment. Whoops, clicked on the wrong thing there. All right, I'm going to finish up here, and that will basically take us down to the crowd mics, which you guys have an ambient mic in the room. That's important for mixing. Get to know how that works and interacts. Then we go down to the buses of the total output of things. All right, here's a couple rules of thumb. The band bus, what is that? That is the band, anything that's not a vocal and anything that's not a lapel, anything that's not a choir mic would come into this. This is a master. Well, last Sunday, I used this in a way when I was mixing. Pastor Carey came up for the transition point of the service. I liked what the band was doing. I didn't want to go mess with my band mix and turn things down individually, so I just lowered the band a little bit by lowering this bus and got what I needed. That's a great example of using that bus, but always remember to get them back to 0. Do not mix with these. All right? These are not meant to do fine-tuning. They're big swooping changes for a moment. If I like how a tune is working, but my vocals are just a little bit hot in the specific tune, maybe it's a very declaratory tune, I could take that vocal bus down just a touch and still keep my vocal mix. Extra, this would be things like orchestra, Vox K through P, that would end up in there, so we have individual control over that. And then we can complement all 3 of the things together. And then the master, we've already talked about the master and the mix aux. There's mastering things happening there. Those don't need to ever be interacted with, and they should always be at 0. Stream mix, same way. That should always be at 0, and that's just a way we're processing some things. Let's talk about the verb or the effects buses. We have 5 effects buses. How do we know what's going on with those? Well, it's actually pretty easy to know what's going on with those. At a glance down here, I see A, B, C, D, E, all the way across on the channels. Now what's cool is I can put in anything into those, in this case, A verb 1, B verb 2, C delay, D delay 2, and E delay 3. But right now what I can tell you is we're doing a whole lot of effects with the vocal channels by these saturation rates in here. So I can tell you that we're mixing in 100% into verb A, we're mixing in 100% into delay C, and we're mixing in, let's say, about 50% into delay D, all by these values right here. So if I wanted to, for whatever reason, yeah, drums is a good example of this. So we got drums, snare, and toms going to verb B. So that verb B is actually processing drums, and you can see these values in here. If I wanted to just have, over the top, big washy cymbals happening, I actually could put some of that into that drum verb bus. Now, you need to understand the waters you're getting into. But I'm just simply using that as an example for how we mix in things into instrument reverbs and what that is. All right, I hope this was very helpful, and I'm going to end right now for the sake of not going too long and for you to be able to palette this material. Thank you.